Right.
Hello, it's October 15th. Sorry, apologies. I've got with me Ofer Cassif of the Hadash party. He's a member of the Israeli Knesset. Welcome, Ofer.
Hello, thank you.
We've got a slight connection problem because Ofer's in South America, not Israel at the minute. So apologies in advance to listeners for this poor connection. Ofer, I'm just going to launch into this question. We're seeing the beginning of, already a terrible onslaught on Gaza by the Israeli military. The Americans are giving a full backing to this operation to respond to the Hamas attacks of last weekend. Do you see this Israeli operation as being a kind of a final attempt to erase the last remaining Palestinian footprint in that part of the world? Is this a kind of a final solution for the Zionist project to erase Palestinians?
Look, first of all, I have to say that my very blunt and clear opinion against the attack of Israel on Gaza doesn't contradict my disgust and, of course, total condemnation of the terrible massacre that Hamas carried out against innocent civilians in the south of Israel. Some of them were my friends. A very good friend of mine just sent me, a WhatsApp message that she was very afraid hearing the Hamas terrorists around her house. And just minutes afterwards, she was killed by those thugs with her husband. And that's only one example. So first and foremost, I ask everybody to also empathize the Israelis with all the criticism that we may have towards its government, and to condemn totally, with no reservation, the massacre that Hamas carried out against the Israeli civilians. Having saying that, the crime that Hamas committed doesn't justify at all the crimes that Israel has been committing in the last few weeks against Gaza, because Israel doesn't do what it does. The assault on Gaza is not against the Hamas. Those who are assaulted are innocent civilians mostly. We know already about close to at least 1,000 innocent civilians that were killed, about 50 families that were totally erased from earth, and perhaps even more. That's in addition, of course, to total families that were erased from earth by Hamas in the south of Israel. So it has nothing to do with combating Hamas. It has everything to do with something else. Now the question is, what is this something else? And I will like to put it in a context. One thing is that the government of Israel was embarrassed by the massacre of Hamas. And it feels like, a thug or the neighborhood's bully that was embarrassed by a relatively weak, pupil of the class. And because of that, the government of Israel waged such an assault, because it was embarrassed, and he wants to prove that this embarrassment was not worthwhile for the butchers of Hamas, and at the same time they want to take revenge. This assault has nothing to do with security of Israel, because everybody knows, including the government and let alone the generals in the army, they all know that such an assault will not bring security to Israelis and to the state of Israel. Quite the contrary. But they're not interested in security either. And by the way, if they were interested in security, so this massacre in the south of Israel would have never happened, because they would have not moved the units of the military that were on the border between Gaza and Israel before, but they moved them to the West Bank to protect the pogroms of the settlers there. And they actually neglected the Israelis of the South. So, as I said, it has nothing to do with security. It has everything to do with revenge, with hatred, and with a lust to revenge the blood that was spilled by Hamas. Now, to put it in a wider context, in 2017, a member of the Knesset named Bezalel Smotrich, then a member of the Knesset at the moment, unfortunately, a minister in the Ministry of Defense as well as Minister of Finance. And this guy was a fascist racist, to say the least. He published in 2017 a plan called the subjugation plan. You can Google and find it. This plan is very clear. It boils down to three. First, Israel has to annex all Palestinian occupied territories, which means basically the West Bank as a whole, without granting any form of rights to the Palestinians who live there, especially not political rights to vote and be elected. That means, of course, an apartheid regime by definition. And I say unofficially, because in practice, Israel already carries out an apartheid regime, but that would have been an official apartheid regime. Second, those Palestinians who are not going to accept their destiny as subjects rather than citizens are going to be expelled. And third, those Palestinians who are going to resist are going to be killed. Everything is published, and it's not in my interpretation, it's not implicit, it's very explicit. Now, full-fledged fascist government consists of racist, and I mean people who really believe in racial theory of Jewish superiority. This government wants to materialize, to realize this. They tried in the beginning to do it by a coup, what is widely or sometimes referred to as a judicial reform, which is hogwash, it's not a judicial reform. So they do, why the government, and we all know why they do, demonstrate against this coup. What they try to do in this coup, the coup itself was not a goal. It was a goal which was this subjugation apartheid plan, not to say elimination plan of Smotrich's. Once they failed, they needed another tactics to realize the very same plan. And the tactics they chose is a war. Now, I said, and I say, and I would say that time and time again, Israel, the government of Israel was interested in war. I do not say that the government of Israel was interested in such a terrible massacre like the one occurred or carried out by Hamas in the south of Israel. I want to believe that no one is that crazy or bigot. So I don't want to say that, I don't believe that the government of Israel was interested in such a massacre like occurred in the south, but they did want a war or a wave of violence to be used by the government to realize this subjugation plan that I mentioned. The assault on Gaza at the moment, as I said before, has nothing to do with security, has very much to do with revenge, but primarily, in my view, has to do with the realization of the subjugation plan. And that goes to what you said before. I mean, there are now three strategies carried out by the Israeli government.
Yes, I mean, Netanyahu has referred to this.
Okay, so
that Gaza attack last weekend, that horrific attack, as you point out, as he's referred to it as the 9/11, a 9/11 moment, a moment of opportunity to, implicitly, that's a moment of opportunity to implement a bigger plan, which is what you're referring to.
Indeed, and I in 1 second, if you allow me, I'll say something else about it. If I just may finish, the former argument, although I know it's quite long. with your permission, there are three strategies now that the government of Israel carries out in order to realize the criminal plan of a genocidal attack. And we must realize this is a genocidal attack, because what Israel does is not only a destruction of the Gaza Strip, but everybody knows that in Gaza, which is a relatively tiny place, 2.5 million Palestinians are crowded. And everybody knows, including the government of Israel and, of course, the military, that an assault is not on Hamas. Most of the Hamas commanders or chiefs, criminals, and I would say they are criminals. Most of them are quite relatively protected. They don't have the problem of water, food, medicine, or no roof above their heads. They also use the Palestinian population in Gaza cynically. The population in Gaza, innocent civilians, babies, women, elderly, etc., they are killed and wounded and distracted by that assault, and everybody knows that. And by the way, as it were, humanitarian call above the people of North Gaza to move to the southern part of Gaza. This is not evacuation. This is a forced expulsion, and which is, of course, a war crime, no less than the war crime that Hamas committed. And so in that respect, this is the strategy. I would call in one word to the strategy of that Israel executes in Gaza at the moment as part of the subjugation plan as the elimination strategy.
Yeah.
Another strategy is carried out in the West Bank and East Jerusalem, which is an ethnic cleansing strategy, which is done not only by vicious molesting the Palestinians, especially by settlers, of course, under the auspices of the army, but also in the last few days, there is a norm and legitimacy given implicitly, and sometimes even less implicitly, by the Israeli establishment to the settlers to kill Palestinians. There have been more than one or two events in the last few days in which settlers just invaded Palestinian peaceful communities and villages and just shot all over the place and killed some people. And by the way, in the village of Kusra, in which they killed 4 Palestinians 3 days ago, they went back to the area of the village at the funeral of those who were killed and killed another 2 during the funeral. So, and of course, there are many other examples. This is part of ethnic cleansing because this is, to terrorize the Palestinians, as I said, mostly peaceful pastors and the communities, to terrorize them, so to drive them away out of fear. Same goes on in the eastern occupied part of Jerusalem. And the third strategy is within Israel, in which about 20-21% of the citizens in Israel are Palestinians, and they are terrorized first by provocation, encouraged by the Ben Gvir, the fascist Minister of Internal Security, and also by a terrible dictatorship, fascist limitation on freedom of speech and freedom of movement. There are many who were viciously arrested by the police in Israel, apparently because they published support for the terrorism of Hamas. But most of those I know have not published anything at all that can be seen as support for Hamas. What they did is that they expressed empathy to the people of Gaza, and justly so, or opposed the attack on Gaza, and for that they were arrested as if they supported the massacre carried out by Hamas. And this is part of this general or master plan of Smotrich's. This is what we should take into account, and unfortunately the international community does nothing to stop it, and quite the contrary. And you asked me about the involvement of the United States, but perhaps you want to add something before.
Well, thanks very much, Ofer, for laying that out so clearly. And this, I think the point you're really making is that this is a much bigger, more sinister, historic situation of like bringing the occupation to a final conclusion. I mean, from the Zionist point of view, and the people that you mentioned there, like Smotrich and the other ministers, a lot of fascists in Netanyahu's government. I mean, do you think the American administration and the European governments realize just how nefarious, how dangerous this situation is? Do they understand? Do you think they've got any awareness what the real sinister purpose of this attack on Gaza is all about?
Look, I believe so. And I put a lot of the responsibility on Biden's administration. And not only on the United States and Biden's administration, but also on other governments, the British government and the EU. And I heard very rare, objections to the assault of Israel on Gaza. And again, I want to be very clear: there's no zero-sum game here. It's not that if you oppose, the assault of Israel, then you support the assault by Hamas or vice versa. I and my friends, we oppose any assault on innocent civilians. What Hamas did in the south of Israel is a war crime, is a crime against humanity. It is a slaughter that no human being can endorse or legitimize. That's unbearable. But the fact that Israel it carries out a massacre by airplanes and bombarding Gaza, and not by not by butchering children with I don't know what guns or grenades and something, that doesn't make it better. That's also a crime, and unfortunately, those political actors that I mentioned, like Biden's administration and the UK's government and others, unfortunately, they are now partners to a vicious war crime.
Yeah.
And by the way, the international community bears another responsibility. Primarily the United States. They could have prevented both the massacre in the south of Israel and the massacre in Gaza had they insisted years ago to end the occupation. They allowed the Israeli occupation to go on. They allowed the bigots of fascist, racist, pogromists, settlers in West Bank to attack on a daily basis Palestinian peaceful workers and pastors and communities. That's the responsibility also of the United States, the EU, and other, I would say, some imperialist agents, but also other governments. And they bear responsibility, and history will judge them too.
Ofer, what's the danger of this escalating into an international war? Iran is warning Israel that the Netanyahu regime, that is, to not proceed with this Gaza operation. Hezbollah, I think, also would issue the same warning. So if this operation continues, this master plan, this subjugation plan, this, I would say, final solution plan to erase...
I couldn't say that. It's interesting what you're saying, because in the Knesset, at the plenum, a few months ago, actually referred to the subjugation plan as the final solution of the Palestinian problem plan. Right. So it's interesting that you use the very same phrase I did.
Okay, well, I didn't realize that, Ofer, but Iran and Hezbollah will get involved if this continues. And the Americans and the Europeans are supporting this Netanyahu regime attack on Gaza. So, do you think that this will proceed into a general wider war? Is there a danger of that?
Look, of course, the danger of that.
Yeah.
The
And
tension that does exist. What I want to, I don't know how many people are going to watch this chat between us. I hope many, and perhaps some of it will get to the ears of some governments. But the danger is very tangible, because following what you said in regard to Iran governments and Hezbollah and others, if Israel continues this assault, let alone enters Gaza on the ground, apart from the butchering, the slaughter that's going to happen there to Palestinian Gazans, first of all, but also many Israeli soldiers are going to be killed. As a peace lover, I don't want anyone to be killed, either Israelis or Palestinians, of course, or others. But if something like that happens, and Iran and Hezbollah and others are going to get involved, who knows, perhaps even Russia, although it is immersed in the Ukraine, but who knows, it's definitely going to lead not only to a regional war, but perhaps into much wider war that may be even called a third world war.
yeah,
This is
well,
preventable, but
Ofer,
in order to prevent it, the
Ofer,
international community must put an end to that.
yeah. Ofer, can I just, sorry to keep interrupting you, but I'm just conscious of our time. It does, decreasing on us. Ofer, I mean, right now,
Sure.
Anthony Blinken, the US Secretary of State, is touring Arab countries with the purpose, reportedly, of trying to prevent an escalation of a wider war. Yet the contradiction is that his administration, the Biden administration, are actually greenlighting a war by their full support for Israel. So I'm just wondering, how do you explain that contradiction? Is it stupidity or cynicism? I mean, the Americans are kind of creating a situation of a wider war, yet apparently, reportedly, Blinken is touring desperately, frenetically, the Middle East, trying to, as it's been reported in the American media, prevent a wider war. So is there, how do you read that? Is it just a cynical duplicity by the Americans?
Look, psychologically speaking, this is a sort of cognitive dissonance. When a person or a group does something that contradicts the words of the very same person or group. But since I do not want to make a psychological analysis, neither of Blinken personally, nor of the American administration, but only a political analysis, I would say that they try to play, a double game. On the one hand, they allow Israel to continue with the assault. It's not that only that the United States allows Israel to do so. It actually strengthens the assault of Israel, not only by supporting Israel internationally, but also by sending arms and ships, etc. So that only encourages even more assaults.
Right.
And on the other end, as you said, they talk against it. But if you just look at the history, the very modern history of the United States, you can see that this kind of double edge game is quite common. When, for instance, the United States attacked Vietnam, so they were attacking Vietnam and speaking of peace. Same when they allowed and carried actually were responsible for the coup of Pinochet against Allende. And of course, this is only the tip of the iceberg. So one thing that I should say for the benefit, I should say that in regard to the United States, is that in that sense they are very consistent. They contradict themselves whenever it serves, whenever they think it serves their interests. But in my view, it doesn't even serve their interests. This is something which perhaps one day will be added to the famous book of Barbara Tuchman, the evil parade, or I translate it from Hebrew, so I don't know because I don't remember the original name in English, but it is a book she wrote about many incidents in which leaders, governments pursued an activity or an operation that was very clearly against their own interests. So this is against the interests of the United States. And by the way, it is also against the interests of Israelis. As I said before, it has nothing to do with security of Israel, but simply revenge and realization of the fascist plan of Smotrich's. This is against the interest of Israelis. It's not a coincidence that I'm a member of the Israeli parliament, because everybody, not everybody, many of course accused me in Israel as being a traitor, a fifth column, self-hatred Jew, whatever. Of course, this is totally poppycock. I'm at the service of justice, and justice appeals to everyone, Jews and Israelis and Palestinians. Everything I'm trying to do may be wrong sometimes. Obviously, I'm only a human being, but my motivation is always been justice for all, including Israelis, and I continue to do that for as much as I can, and hopefully my friends and I will be successful. But
can I just
without the assistance of the international community, we are all lost.
Okay, Ofer, can I just ask you finally, what would a peace solution, a settlement of the conflict in your part of the world look like? I mean, would you subscribe to a one-state solution where Jews and Arabs, Christians and Muslims live together in one state? Because the two-state solution seems to be completely obsolete now. What would you sketch out as being a viable peace settlement?
Sorry, I cannot hear you well.
Yeah, we're losing connection, but sorry.
My party itself, as long we have a long-standing perception that the two-state solution is at the moment the only. Do not have a problem, ideologically speaking, with a one-state solution, provided it is, of course, a democratic, equal state in which everybody is entitled to equal rights, collective rights, national rights, and individual rights. As a socialist, of course, democracy also refers to the rights of and to the power of the working class. This is something else at the moment, not less relevant to our discussion. But under the circumstances, a two-state solution is a must. People must understand that one-state solution maybe sound very nice, and I agree that it sounds very nice. This is unrealistic. There are only two alternatives at the moment. One is one-state apartheid solution, and the other is two-state solution. Is one state at the moment, given the power, and it is true, by the way, that between the Jordan River and the Mediterranean, more or less there's an equal number of Palestinians and Jews. But one state means that those who control the infrastructure, especially the military infrastructure, and the other are mostly, Israelis, Jewish Israelis, and the establishment. I mean, do not refer to individuals now. That will never, ever, under the circumstances, if they don't change, that will never, never real democratic state, but only an apartheid state and wars. So what remains? Two-state solution. That means that all settlements should be dismantled on the spot. Neither of them can stay in the future independent Palestinian state. And of course, I'm not talking that goes without saying that hostility to an end, from both sides. Although, of course, there's no symmetry given the differences in power, but still must be ended. And as a Palestinian state should be established, on all the territories Israel occupied in June 1967. That means Gaza Strip, West Bank, and East Jerusalem as the capital of the Palestinian state. That's the solution at the moment. Yeah. Given that, let's imagine, and unfortunately it's just an imagination at the moment, let's imagine that such a state is formed in the future. If everybody involved wants that, upon consent, to form one state, a federation, confederation, with Jordan, without Jordan, as I said, upon consent of everybody, that may happen. But the most important thing to save lives of Palestinians and Israelis alike, to save lives, a Palestinian state in the all occupied territories of 1967 is a must. That's the reason I'm so angry at the international community in general and the United States in particular that haven't done anything to move towards such a solution, because it was much more easier to be achieved 2 weeks ago than now, although it is still realistic. But something must be done to put the right pressure on the Israeli government and those Palestinian organizations who oppose that too. And otherwise, everybody is going to be sacrificed.
Yeah. I mean, to just recap there, Ofer, we're facing a very, very heinous situation, a very grim vista, in that this final solution, the subjugation plan, is being implemented with Western state support, and there's seems to be no restraint on that that process, which is it's a horrifying situation.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Ofer Cassif, thank you for joining me today. I hope the listeners find this very interesting and rewarding as an insight into the politics of your part of the world. Your party is the Hadash party with the Tal coalition. You've got 5 members of the Israeli parliament, 5 out of 120. Are you gaining more electoral support among Israelis for the policies that you espouse?
It's too early to know, but under the circumstances, it's very dire, the situation, and there's a lot of hostility. And as I said before, that the first not to the Palestinians within Israel, but also in regard to the opposition, that those who are against the occupation as well within Israel, Jews as well, are persecuted. As I said, if you just write something which express sympathy to the suffering of Palestinians in Gaza, a post on Facebook, you are immediately arrested.
Right.
And accused in supporting Hamas, which is totally ludicrous. And by the way, a good friend of mine, a journalist, a human rights activist, a very radical anti-occupation, ultra-Orthodox Jew, was viciously attacked yesterday in his house with his family by a mob because of his views. The police hardly helped him. They arrived there late, too late, after a few hundreds were already, close to the door of his house. They just, took him to his car and left. He had to, to flee and to find a shelter in an hospital, while the mob is still outside waiting for him to get out of the hospital. That's the situation within Israel too. The police, which is a totally now private militia of Ben Gvir, the most disgusting fascist, racist minister. And of course, there's a very, very tough competition who's the worst.
Mm.
This, it's not the police anymore. This is a private militia of the Kahana's gangs. And they are armed too, because they passed a new bill recently, or they, to be more precise, but the minister, that everybody can carry a weapon in one of his planes, very famously, the playwright Chekhov, that the gun that appears in the first part of the play for sure is going to shoot in the third part, and that's exactly what's going to happen. The slaughter in Gaza already penetrated the West Bank and is just about to penetrate into Israel if the international community doesn't do anything to stop it in advance, and the risk is there.
Right. Ofer Cassif, thank you very much for giving us your time and your insights. Really appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, and please send me the link.
I will. Thank you.
Ciao.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.